But for now, let's talk about Member of Parliament for the Edansi Asokwa area, constituency in the Ashanti region, Katie Hammond. He's come under intense criticism on social media for shaming some young people who actually hooted and heckled the president at the just-ended Global Citizens Festival over the weekend. Footages of the president went viral on social media, showing some patrons at the event heckling the president when he mounted the stage to deliver a speech reacting to the issue. Katie Hammond berated those who actually heckled the president, saying it is un-Ghanaian and reflects poorly on the image of the country.
On that. I think it's scandalous. I think it's scandalous. I don't think as a nation we got into that stage. I mean, I was petrified when I heard it. The president was speaking as soon as he opened his mouth. I heard, was it in unison? But if it's that small cabal, whatever it is, I mean, I was, let me repeat the word, petrified. Basically, they didn't understand. I haven't seen anything of this sort in Ghana before. We shouldn't start things which become precedent. You can't handle them. You let the genie out of the bottle, completely difficult to get our lives together. I have been very, very upset. I haven't seen anything like this before. Even on political platforms, we don't do these things. We don't. I mean, so to imagine that on the national platform like this, a president mounts the platform, and all he said, I think he said in Cree, that the whole of the world or the whole of it's here, and then people start shouting at him. I think it is unfair. We must be ashamed of ourselves. I don't think it is a proper development in our country. And too much shouting connotes an absence of intelligent thinking. So, you know, we're always shouting and shouting. You're not thinking. You know what I mean? You're not thinking. No, you're drawing the president. Who doesn't know that times are hard? I mean, it's not debatable. We all accept that times are hard. Look, yesterday I was asking the system, I was asking democracy, it isn't right. There should be some respect, you know. In Pennsylvania, my more, they be America. As somebody say, Yankapa, say, Yakwako, Abrewa. Yankase Yako, whom Monona Muguana, Muti, Aya, Kubeda Muguano, Yamoni, Yaziko, whom, Yaziakwako, whom Abrewa. Abrewano a penny.
So that comment is beginning to create a lot of tension on social media, I should call it that way, with a lot of young persons taking to social media to criticize the Member of Parliament. Let's bring in the Economic Fighters League. They believe that the president, the Member of Parliament, I should say, Katie Hammond, ought to retract and possibly apologize for his comments. Let's speak now to Hadi Mohammed Yakubu, Fighter General of the Economic Fighters League. First of all, Hadi, I need to find out from you. Some say this is a clear verdict on the president's performance in terms of handling the economy and creating prosperity for the youth. What's the take of the Economic Fighters League on this?
Yeah, thank you very much, Blessed, and I hope you are having a blessed afternoon. It is very obvious that this is a very damning verdict on the leadership of Akufo-Addo and the MPP government. It is just like how prior to 2016 people were so despondent and very frustrated at the economic situation that, you know, they would go every length to criticize the president of the day at that time. It is to say that the economy of the country has not improved. In fact, it has got worse. Debt levels have become unsustainable.
Hadi, if you're still with us, you're making a point about how this is casting a verdict on the performance of government on this. Yes, we lost you briefly, Hadi.
Yes, sorry about that. So it is very clear that this is a very damning verdict on the leadership of the president, and not only the president, even Katie Hammond and his colleagues. I mean, this is very, very, very clear. And I note very interestingly that Katie Hammond said that he has never seen anything like this before. And I think that for anybody who who thinks about, reflects, who has deep reflections. Katie Hammond should know what the times have spelled for the people. I mean, if it is just about hooting that you care so much about, then what about people who wake up in the morning these days and are not able to afford cocoa and kose or kenke and fish? What about people who can no longer buy gobe? What about people who can no longer afford to pay school fees or pay rent?
He says if you want to do that, criticize constructively. Don't disrespect the president. That's his opinion on this matter.
Who determines what sort of criticism is disrespect? Who determines that? And I think we should we should do away with this mentality that the elderly are ipso facto entitled to be revered. No, respect is earned, blessed. Respect is earned.
I mean, just take a look at this. This is the president who comes to an apolitical concert. This is not a political rally. He comes across, wants to deliver a goodwill message, and then he's been heckled on a global stage.
The fact that it wasn't a political platform is even the more reason why this is so ominous, why this is so clear a message to the president and his leadership and all those people who are advising him. And I think the president should be very careful about people like Katie Hammond. If this is the sort of if he has any sort of access to the president, and this is the kind of advice that he will give him, I think Katie Hammond, the president, should be very careful about people like that, because they will not be people who can look him in the eyes and tell him the truth, that the youth are very agitated, the youth are frustrated. Look, the national security did their own strategic document. And in some event in Accra some time ago, they mentioned it, that lack of opportunity, lack of employment, and all of these things are raising tensions in the populace. So if you see this kind of thing, it is actually a very good way for people to vent their frustration at somebody that they have employed. And note, this is not somebody who has come to lord over us. This is somebody that we have employed, somebody who is surviving, both him and his family, on our taxes. So we have every right to show in any way that we are dissatisfied with the kind of leadership that he is providing. And it doesn't lie with the likes of Katie Hammond, who also lives on our taxes, by the way, to come and tell us what sort of criticism constitutes respect or disrespect. But of course, I mean, why would you blame him? He says that the youth have nothing in our heads, and we have coconut. In fact, he has to know that coconut is not empty. Coconut is actually very, very useful. These days we use coconut for a whole lot of things.
Right.
Yes, coconut is not empty. Coconut is a very, very useful thing. So if he says we have coconut on our head, for me, I think I prefer coconut, somebody who has coconut as a head, to somebody who has a chamber pot as a head.
Well, anyway, that's
I would prefer coconut to a chamber pot.
That's
and
on
I'm
a
happy
lighter
that
note.
he didn't say chamber pot. Blessed. I'm happy he said coconut, because it is very, very useful. But I think there is need for anybody who has reflection to sort of ask themselves why we have got to a point where a very conservative society, where reverence is naturally given to the elderly, has got to a point where young people have the courage and confidence to hoot at the president of the land. It must tell you something. And if you are somebody who reflects, then this must be a wake-up call. And I'm saying that for people like Katie Hammond, I think that caliber, that sort of mentality, that if this kind of thing happens and it is shameful, is something that the president should take very keen note about, and must not allow himself to be deceived by people like Katie Hammond.
And on that note, you say that he needs to apologize to the Ghanaian youth. Why?
Well, you see, Katie Hammond can say what he has said, because I mean he's somebody who has been in parliament for long, and what does he have to show for it? And people keep voting for him. And the truth is that if today a ballot box is put before the people of Ghana, they will still go and vote. In 2020, we campaigned that the options that were on the table were completely useless, and therefore people should boycott the elections. But people still went and voted, and people voted for the likes of Katie Hammond. Now, what has he to show for all the years in parliament that he had? And even somebody who has absented himself for several, in the last parliament, in the seventh parliament, Katie Hammond actually was one of the 53 MPs who violated the Article 97(2) of the Constitution, which says that MPs must not absent themselves 15 times or more without permission of the Speaker. Analysis by Odikro showed that Katie Hammond did that, and nothing happened to him. So, of course, he would have the audacity and the temerity to come out and insult people this way. He would have that. If systems had been working, if they had been good enough, if the older generation had been good enough to rule this country the way it ought to have been designed, and systems were working, Katie Hammond would not have been in parliament today. He wouldn't, because he would have been kicked out by that provision of the Constitution. So, I mean, I don't blame him for having the temerity to say what he has to say. And I think that we need to make a distinction. Also, the young people, we also need to be very careful not to lump old people together, because there are some very sensible and very reasonable old people out there who admit that the older generation has completely failed this country, and that we, the young people, ought to re-energize and take leadership and make sure that we turn things around for ourselves and for our children.
Hadi, we'll wrap up our conversation. We'll wrap up our conversation taking a look at culture. But just before I come to that point, I want to bring in some of the comments on social media, for instance, how some persons have been reacting to Katie Hammond. So you have excerpts on your screens right now. For instance, this is from David Ofori Aye. He says the Honorable Katie Hammond and Nado administration has completely deflated any belief in that abroad, which is to go to the extent of what Katie Hammond was talking about, reverence for the elderly. At his age, Ghanaians expected a selfless, committed, honest and dedicated leader who believed in Ghana. The president has served the youth with a hot dish of disappointment and hopelessness. What he witnessed was actually the objective reality of how the youth and the rest of the people feel. Then there's also Idrisu Abudu, who says that, but even for Katie Hammond himself, what wisdom has he ever exhibited that shows that he is a grown-up person? All his thoughts and acts, well, that's quite a bit harsh. So Idrisu, you might want to calm down a bit on that one. So these are some of the comments coming through. For the sake of time, Hadi, let's just get to the issue about culture. Where we place culture in all of this? And some of the reaction, very harsh comments we're seeing on social media come up against Katie Hammond.
Well, Blessed, I think we ought to discuss culture within a context. Culture is not a static phenomenon. Culture is an evolving social phenomenon. And so human beings react to situations, and those situations become ways of life. And what are we reacting to now in this kind of situation? People are reacting to bad leadership, nepotistic leadership, leadership that is full of corruption, and also completely devoid of any sympathy for the people. Leadership that is full of corruption, that is full of stealing, that is full of any sort of misgovernance that you can characterize. So people will react to it, and they are not going to react to it, in a kind way. And as I keep saying, people think that in our society, whatever an elderly person does must be taken for granted. No, we cannot continue to do that. If old people misbehave, they must be put in their position.
Let's wrap up in 30 seconds.
It's supposed to be earned.
Right. Very briefly, we're wrapping up, Hadi. What would you do as the Economic Fighters League if Katie Hammond, for instance, refuses to apologize?
No, Blessed. We are not going to waste time on things like this. He's entitled to his opinion just as much as we are also entitled to our opinion. So he can, as I said earlier, it is good that he said that you have coconuts, and I know coconut is very useful. I'm happy we don't have heads that look like chamber pot. And I think maybe people who have been in government or leadership or parliament or wherever for a very long time with very little to show would probably want to assess themselves whether it is coconuts they have or chamber pots.
Yeah, but on a lighter note, you have the same beard he's complaining about. He says you carry about beards these days and you don't respect at all in terms of how the youth treats the elderly these days. But we need to go. We need to wrap up. I'm grateful so much.
No, but I'm saying that respect is earned. And I think that one of the things that has actually held us back as a society is the issue of not questioning the elderly when they do something wrong. We must have the boldness to question the elderly when they do something wrong. It doesn't mean we should disrespect. It doesn't mean we should shame or do anything like that. But if they don't do something wrong, we must have the boldness and must have the courage to question. If I grow old, I wouldn't mind if a young person comes to tell me that, Ofa, you are not making sense. I wouldn't mind. If I'm not making sense, I must be told in the face that I'm not making sense. But if you are not making sense, if all this we have seen over the years, over the last several years that they have been in power, this elderly generation, this is the kind of system that they have built for us. And so if we cannot voice out freely that this system that you have given to us is an away sort of system, then what kind of society are we building? Are we timid souls? No. We cannot continue this way. So they must take this as a lesson. Akufo-Addo must take this as a lesson. Katie Hammond must take this as a lesson and make sure that they amend their ways and rule with compassion and with competence and with sound governance principles. In that way, when next they come on stage, it will be praises and claps rather than hooting.
Okay, would have to.
But if they continue this way, maybe something worse will happen.
Thank you so much, Hadi Yakubu with the Economic Fighters League, and that's all.